This episode is brought to you by Sacred Rites, which provides support, resources, and networks for religion scholars committed to translating their research to a broader audience. You can find more information about their work at sacred-rites.org. In the chaos of today's world, we're all searching for meaning. The wellness industry has sold us a promise that we can find it if we just buy the right products, attend the right retreats, and follow the right celebrity gurus. But is this true? Or are we picking and choosing from a self-care salad bar in ways that satisfy our hunger but don't truly nourish us? Thank you so much for joining me. This is Greg Soden. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Liz Bucar as my guest to discuss these questions and the brand new book, Beyond Wellness: How Restoring the Religious Roots of Spiritual Practices Can Heal Us, released on April 28, 2026. Liz Bucar is a University of Chicago-trained religious ethicist, professor of religion at Northeastern University, and prolific public scholar. Her popular writing has appeared in The Atlantic, The Los Angeles Times, Teen Vogue, and The Wall Street Journal, and she is the author of 4 books, including the award-winning Stealing My Religion and Pious Fashion. Her writing, teaching, and public lectures cover a wide range of topics, from religion and healthcare to the politics of religious clothing, but generally focus on how a deeper understanding of religious difference can change our sense of what is right and good. It is my pleasure to bring you this conversation on Beyond Wellness with Dr. Liz Bucar. Dr. Liz Bucar, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. It's fun to be back.
I am delighted that you're here. Just to catch people up on who you are and what you do, can you go ahead and give your sort of a little bit of an intro to the listeners out there so they can just kind of get a sense of who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Liz Bucar. I'm a professor at Northeastern University, and I have expertise in comparative religious studies, and my work has gone a lot of different places. We'll probably talk about them because Greg's familiar with some of my past books. Mm-hmm. But what I'm really interested in right now is particular landscape in the U.S. I think that's like sort of shifting right now. Like, how are we reimagining religion and spirituality, particularly young people, in the context, I think, a little bit of wellness, but also like, religion has a PR problem. So a lot of us don't like the term religion, and yet we're still interested in religious questions. So I'm really interested in like what that looks like, what we might be making new or making over right now. So that's really where my interest is lying right now.
Yeah, as a non-religious person who is sort of obsessed with religion myself, I totally resonate with that as well. But let's go back a little bit. You mentioned some of your other books. I've talked to you several times on this show over the years. We talked about your book, Pious Fashion. Mm-hmm. We talked about your book, Stealing My Religion. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the journey from Pious Fashion to Stealing My Religion to your new book, Beyond Wellness: How Restoring the Religious Roots of Spiritual Practices Can Heal Us, coming soon from Penguin Random House. But tell me a little bit about that journey from those books into this book.
Yeah, okay, so that is a journey. So I think what holds those 3 books together is that it's my attempt to write in this kind of new way. I've been really experimenting with writing for not just the academy and not just for my students and my colleagues, but trying to find readers and general audiences kind of where they are and where they're questioning and where their interest is. And so those 3 books all do that. Pious Fashion comes out of more my comparative work from grad school and my research overseas, where I did a lot of sort of cross-cultural work. And that book was focused on case studies in Turkey and Indonesia and Iran, places I did field work. And the sort of like idea of that book was it was a push and a pull, both that like people, I was a little frustrated that people thought about Islam and kind of only thought about hijab and the headscarf as like this like one thing, this like, obsessed with it, particularly non-Muslims in the West. But I also was like, okay, great, that's an opportunity then. I'm going to look at that issue and think about it as an entry point into a bigger conversation about what does it mean, what does gender, what does the tradition really mean, what are the politics of that, how is it different in different places, how does fashion play in, as a way to sort of do some like public teaching about Islam and gender. So that book really comes out of more of my sort of, I guess, classical training, in terms of like language work and work in Islam and comparative work, multiple traditions. Stealing My Religion, so that book was with Harvard Press, and Stealing My Religion, which was my last book before this new one, was also Harvard Press. And I sat down I think Pious Fashion was just out, and I sat down with my editor, and we were talking about the next book that she wanted me to write. And I said, okay, but first I have to write this article about religious appropriation because I'm so annoyed. I'm like so annoyed by what's happening in my classroom. And like, she was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, people are just throwing out this word appropriation. They won't have these complicated, I mean, I am someone who like is against cultural appropriation, but I just found that the deployment of that term really polarized students into two camps. I couldn't have these like conversations, these ethical conversations that I really needed them to have for them to kind of grow into understanding, a higher level of sort of like ethical reasoning. But also I was super annoyed that like religious appropriation was getting a pass. Like we were only talking about cultural appropriation outside of, and people who were like super annoyed by cultural appropriation were the same people who were like, yeah, but religious appropriation, well, religion you can steal from because whatever, they're powerful and bad and evil. And so I was like, I'm just annoyed. I'm going to write this article first, and then we'll talk about the book. She's like, no, I want that book. And I was like, that is not a book, Sharmila. I told her that is just me ranting. She's like, no, it's a book. And then like on the back of a napkin, because we're like, having lunch, we like kind of went through the different chapters I could do. And we got to the chapter on yoga, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. You mean I'm going to write this book is going to involve me like going to ashram and leaning into my yoga practice? It's like, okay, I'll write this book for you. And that book was really fun to write. And it's the first book where I am a character in the book, right? You really see the messiness, the grappling that I'm going through. Religious appropriation, religious borrowing. So like you, I am non-religious affiliated, right? I am a nun, N-O-N-E, right? That's what Pew Forum would call me.
Yeah.
So that book is me really grappling and coming to terms with a lot of stuff I was doing fit into the category of appropriation. Some of it was, political. Some of it was educational. Some of it was like health related, right? Those are the 3 chapters, like me about my teaching, study abroad, having students walk a pilgrimage, walk the Camino. What was the matter with that? Maybe there were some ethical problems with that, right? The issue of solidarity, hijab, people putting on hijab as a way to like show solidarity with Muslim women, and some of the blowback from Muslim women being like, maybe don't do that. No, thank you. And then yoga, the chapter about thinking about health and like I can do this because it's for health, but still what might you owe to communities, which practices come from, how might it be done in less harmful ways? How was I interacting with basically structures of injustice? Like how was I like asserting my privilege and I didn't even realize it in these different spaces? So that book is like messy and me showing my work and being really vulnerable and being like, I messed up and I'm literally an expert in this stuff, right? Like my PhD from University of Chicago says religious ethics on it. And still, and I know these communities, I've worked with these communities for decades, and still I like didn't see kind of what I was doing. And so it's a little bit of a like, a confession of like the mess ups. It's a little bit of the yuck your yum is what we'd say in my household, right? It's
holding the mirror up to yourself.
Yeah, like maybe you want to feel a little bad about this. So that book is a little bit of that sort of feeling. But my new book is something different. And it is my first trade book. So it is, like you said, with Penguin Random House, with an imprint, with Tarcher, with Penguin Random House. And it comes a little bit out of that last book. I had an agent, my agent now, Mark Tauber, who is a great thought partner for me. He's been really wonderful because he knows the religion really well. He knows the religion space. He contacted me after he read Studying My Religion. He's like, ever thought about writing a trade book? And I said, well, yeah, I think about all this stuff because, as you also know, I'm a director of Sacred Rights. I'd run this like grant-funded project about public scholarship and training other people to do public scholarships, which means I dabble in public scholarship genres to see like I got on TikTok a couple years ago to see how useful that was. If you follow me on Instagram, you see I do all kinds of like stuff on Instagram. So I had thought about trade books partly because people had been asking me like, how do we move into trade books? And so I thought I'll experiment. I use myself as a guinea pig, right? And then I figure out what the training and what the space looks like. But I said, yeah, I kind of am interested. And he said, well, I think there's a trade book version of Studying My Religion. And then the funny thing is, he and I did pitch basically a trade book version of it. And I think I can tell you this. The book was called Unwell. It was very serious. And it was, again, it was very critical, right? It was, again, a yuck your yum kind of book. And we went to the big 5 presses, and they were like, people don't want to be, it's not quite shaming, right? Because I'm like the villain in some ways in the book, but people don't want to be told, they don't want their young yucked, right? They want to like know something positive and prescriptive. And so we actually went back to the drawing board, and I thought, okay, this is actually something new for me. If that's the problem, what's the solution? And in some ways a really uncomfortable place for a scholar to be. Like, it's much easier to deconstruct, especially if you are someone who studies religion who's not religious themselves. To offer up a better version is a little uncomfortable. But that's what the new book is doing. So it sort of comes out of the studying my religion, what I learned about whatever myself in the world, and then thinking about, okay, what are the practices that I see are so popular right now, spiritual wellness practices. What would it mean to take the religion more seriously? What would it mean? Like, why do I think that's important? And what would it look like to do that? And how would it change the practices and make them work better for us, quite frankly? And that's what that book is. It was also incredibly fun research to do, and there's a long story of how I got there, but it is, it's the trajectory of where I am. And now I'm in this new place where I'm like, suddenly I'm kind of like, I've started to sort of describe myself, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this yet, but almost being like a public theologian for non-believers, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I couldn't believe it when I started seeing the content that you were producing in the world and how much your following is growing. Like, I've been watching it in real time. It's been amazing.
I think it's like what you said. I think we're not as weird as we think we are, right? I think I'm a skeptic. Like, that's my religious studies hat. I'm just skeptical. I like to deconstruct. I'm fine being critical and having being, I don't mean critical like religion is bad, but like thinking about religion critically, right? But I also am getting to understand that I don't like this term, but that I am maybe also a seeker. So I think a lot of people are in this middle ground where they're like really suspicious of religion and don't trust religious institutions, don't like the term religion, but are still deeply interested in the questions and the resources and the conversation. So I'm coming to see religion as a conversation partner, not only as an object to study, but for the way I also understand my own life. I mean, the book is called Beyond Wellness, and boy, did we struggle with the title for this book. At some point it was called The Religion Factor. And I said, I don't want to call it that because I don't want to scare off people who don't like religion because that's like who I want to talk to. And it's called Beyond Wellness because that's what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in something much bigger than wellness. I want well-being. I want real well-being. I want real human flourishing. Wellness sounds like too low a bar. It sounds like hitting your macros and having a good BMI and maybe like taking enough meds that you'd only have happy thoughts or whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but it just seems too low of a bar. I want all of it. I want the mess too. I want the hard stuff. I want to understand like really how we can like lean into human life and how religions can help us think about how to do that.
Yeah. And, when I was reading this book too, because I got a copy of it and I've been really enjoying it. And I saw so much of myself in it because if I look back at my own past in the last decade, there have been times where I've been vegan, done a disciplined hot yoga practice, done Rinzai Zen meditation, like chanting the Heart Sutra in Japanese,
Yeah.
and also gone to synagogue for certain things that people invited me to. And so I was very, very much doing what is called the spiritual salad bar that you're going over in the beginning of the book. And I never had a term for it, but I was just this like atheist, agnostic, non-believer, none, None, doing all sorts of different stuff. So I think that's a really important crux of the book is the spiritual salad bar. And I wonder if you can just talk to listeners about that concept in general and how this all came about.
Yeah, so I'm sure people have called it something like the spiritual salad bar before as well. But the way I think about it is that I'm really talking. I'm interested in talking to anybody, and I know that I've been resonating with people who are within religious communities themselves and thinking about this stuff. But when I think about the salad bar, I think about how there are a lot of us who aren't comfortable with a religious identity. We don't want to order off the menu. Like, we don't want to say, I could lean into the fact that I'm baptized Catholic, but I don't identify as Catholic, or that my partner is Jewish, right? But we're not raising our daughter Jewish, although we do the high holidays, right? So it's like the identity thing isn't comfortable with us. We don't want to order off the menu. So instead we go to the salad bar and we pick and choose the things that we like and we put them on our plate. And maybe it's because someone told you hot yoga was going to be good for you, so you try it out. Or maybe, you're drawn. So I'm actually personally really drawn to the spiritual fitness and body sort of practices. I really like that stuff. I am really personally drawn to those things. You don't have to convince me to try that stuff out. I'm pretty much willing to try anything. But we just put on our plate what we like. And then, we walk away with a salad that we feel like is probably good for us. I think the problem with it is that we don't know the ingredients list really, right? Or we're just putting the kale and the tofu on the salad, but like maybe we're putting like some blue cheese dressing on it too. So we're like, or we're like allergic to kale, or the kale has salmonella in it, or something. Like we just don't know enough about what we're putting on our plate, because we're just dipping in. And I think I think a lot of us have felt. So I don't think I'm saying anything new. I'm just sort of saying something that a lot of people have felt like a little dissatisfied with that approach. It's like not quite getting us there. So what can we do if we're not really willing to kind of convert to something that looks like the boomers' religion or our grandparents' religion? What if we want something a little different, but we don't want something shallow? And then a lot of us also are really worried about these issues and concerned about these issues of appropriation and what do we owe communities whose practices these come from. And I see that much more concern from that idea than we did, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think that spiritual salad bar, in some ways it's like the new age like version of spirituality, but I think that there's this recognition that maybe it's not working as well for us as we want it to.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a huge variety of topics and case studies in the book too that you talk about. So just to give listeners sort of an overview, like there's yoga, there's mindfulness meditation, there's Alcoholics Anonymous, detox diets, plant psychedelics. There's a wide range here.
There is.
And you talk about a 3-step process to walking the path between like dogmatic religion and bland spirituality. And maybe before we'll talk about a little bit of the case studies, but tell me a little bit about this 3-step process that you talk about in the intro chapter, because it's really cool.
Yeah. Now, before I say that, so you can cut this, I'm going to open up that chapter and look at it again.
Go for it. It's on page 5.
I know you told me that so helpfully.
No, it's all good. All good. And we'll take a little break too, because we've been nailing it so far.
Okay, great. I was like, you're so fun to talk to. Okay. I was like, and it's on page 5 because Greg already told me where it was.
I'm already slamming my coffee over here too. I'm just.
Okay. Okay. So I do talk about how I think the different approach to the spiritual salad bar has a sort of 3-step process. So people don't think it's like an easy answer. So the first step is really to learn about, or maybe to acknowledge that spiritual practice comes from a religious tradition or a religious community of practice, which sometimes is a really big bar to get over. These things didn't come from nowhere. Like just because manifestation just showed up on your Instagram account doesn't mean manifestation is new, right? Just because mindfulness is new in your school doesn't mean that practice of contemplation is something that's new and hasn't been used by religious traditions or in different communities in different ways. So I think that often the assertion that something is spiritual is someone trying to say it's not religious, it's just spiritual. But I want to be like, no, let's just for a second, let's pretend like it's all, let's acknowledge it's also probably religious. So that's like actually a big step and a big bar to get over for some people. So if you think about the yoga chapter, people are very, oh, no, there's nothing about yoga. There's nothing about my yoga that's religious. But okay, so maybe just suspend disbelief for a moment and be like, okay, well, what if this practice was religious? So like, what if we think about it in terms of religious content and communities that it came from? So that's sort of like the first thing. So we don't erase all the religion. And then the second step is like, okay, once you're like, okay, maybe there's some religion here that I could look at, is to look at what that religion is. Like, what is that framework, right? Often what it comes down to is there some ethical framework there. There's usually a community. And I think those two things are really important because I think that's the stuff that gets kind of erased out when we pick and choose in the salad bar. We're doing things alone. We're personally curating. We've lost the community. We don't really like having to take on someone's set of values and ethics, right? But like maybe that's part of like what the practice is trying to like do to us, form us into a certain person. So I think that there's like trying to understand some of that religious container is like the second step, right? So acknowledging that maybe there's some religion and then trying to understand what some of that religious container is. Sometimes that's framework, sometimes that's concept, sometimes that's about what the community looks like. And then the final step is the most complicated. It's one people want to skip to, but it's the hardest, and it's definitely the one size does not fit all. And it's just applying these religious insights to our lives. So each of my chapters, I try to come up like the end, like here's the religious insight that I got out of this. But then the question, like how to apply it to your life, is really up to you. I'm really emphasizing in this book a lot, like the importance of understanding your core values and understanding the values that a practice is trying to like habituate you into, maybe, and making sure those things line up, because it may be that you go through step 1 and 2, you get to step 3, you're like, I do not want to do this thing, because this thing is like, now that I understand it and now that I understand what it's meant to do, right, this powerful thing, I don't want to do that to myself, right? I don't agree with that. So I think that that's like kind of the third step, right? To think about how it fits into your version or your evolving version of what real being looks like, real well-being looks like. Yeah.
And to me, there's no downside to learning number 1 and number 2, right? So say you have
yeah, but we're religion nerds. That's because we like that stuff.
I know, but like say somebody has a really disciplined yoga practice. Yeah. There's no downside to learning the origin, because then you just are a smarter person.
Well, that's interesting. I would say there is actually maybe a downside. I would say that learning for yoga, for example, I've had a yoga practice since grad school. I think learning more about it did change my practice. So, for example, I'm not comfortable teaching. I'm a certified yoga teacher. I'm not comfortable teaching anymore because I think of yoga much more devotionally than I used to.
Interesting.
I also can't go to certain studios or certain teachers who do things that I now find, I mean, I would even say violent. Like I can't hear it. It doesn't land with me the same way. So I think there is like, in that way, some danger of the practice changing for you. But then again, I don't think it was ever really working for you the way you thought it was, right? But so, I mean, I don't want to just, talk people out of the step 1 and 2, because that's my bread and butter, right? That's what you do. That's what I do. We're teachers. We want people to like learn, and we think the more you know, the better. But I do think that there is a risk. I don't think in all cases you learn more and you like want to do the practice more and you do it better. I think in some cases you learn more and you're like, whoa, nope. Or there's this. I mean, in really bad cases, there's a form of like more moral injury that happens. That you're like, I was doing this thing all along, which has this values embedded in it that I don't like, and that go against my core sense of who I am. And I have to stop doing this thing right away because I now feel this disruption, right? So, I mean, I think that I think it's worth it. And I think things in terms of consent and like not having that moment happen later on. I think that we want to do these practices because even those of us who are non-believers believe these practices do something, right? I'm like interested in yoga. I always say I like Pilates. I mean, I don't like Pilates. Pilates is hard, but like I'm interested in yoga more so than Pilates because I think yoga is something different. I do think it has a spiritual dimension. I think that's why it's so popular when people, do it at candlelight and, people really get into it. But if these things are powerful, they're powerful, and we should know what they're doing to us. So yeah, I mean, I think, I don't mean to like overstate the danger part, but I don't want people to think that like, oh, I'm just going to walk in and learn about this and it won't change. It could change it in a way that it doesn't work for you in the same way.
That's so interesting. Okay, so let's chat about, so you mentioned yoga a lot. We've alluded to mindfulness meditation a little bit. These are very common things that are now being applied in like corporate settings, in schools. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing with regards to the way these things are being applied in like schools and corporate settings, and just some major things that you're noticing when you're looking at those.
Yeah, I mean, those are two good cases. If we look at just at schools, for example, right? Those are two cases of things that have been, I mean, not when I was a kid, but now yoga and mindfulness programs are a part of public schools, everywhere. That would have been seen as very countercultural when I was a kid. And my kid is in a public school in New England. I went to a public school in New England. She had mindfulness and yoga starting in kindergarten. I never saw any of that, except for at home because my mother was a yoga teacher. So I think partly the way that is done is through the insistence that these things are not religious. So whether or not that's through court cases, and I talk about one of the really interesting court cases in the yoga chapter, or through the medicalization of mindfulness is a good example. I mean, meditation and mindfulness is really interesting. I've been writing a lot about it because there's just a lot going on in the world right now, and it gets talked about a lot, I think, in this political moment, the importance of being mindful and the importance of letting the current political situation wash over us. And there's, secular meditation and, how mindfulness can save us all from this, the world burning down around us and stuff. So I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot about mindfulness, but it's interesting. It's important to remember that if we want to talk about, say, Buddhist origins of contemplation and meditation, that there's all kinds of moves that have to happen in the history of Buddhism, as well as what happens when the meditation practice sort of leaves Buddhist community. So there's first this idea that meditation was always super important to Buddhism. That's not really what scholars say. It was not really an important practice. It wasn't a practice really that was central to even what monks did. It certainly wasn't a practice that laity did, right? So there's this moment of rethinking meditation as a practice that laity, so non-monastics, could do as a way to sort of shore up, Buddhism in different sort of, really quite frankly, anti-imperial, anti-colonialism sort of settings. So there's that first move of being reclaiming meditation rather within Buddhism. And then there's this, so that's a big move. That's not always true in the tradition. And then there's this move to reclaim the techniques of, say, Buddhist meditation and different sort of, if you think of insight meditation or something, not just for laity, but without for laity without any other sort of Buddhist preparation, which is also be very weird in the tradition. And then suddenly not within the context of a sangha or a community, but now in the context of a hospital, for example, right? These things work. We can prove it. The neuroscientists have put, electrodes on the Dalai Lama and we can see it works. Well, the Dalai Lama didn't need electrodes to know it worked. He knew it worked. But the interesting thing about the movement into the hospital setting, right, is then the authority of the authority moves to medical scientific, biomedical authority from the religious community. And, in some ways that's good. It means insurance will pay for it. But I do think that something is lost, and partly it's, I just sort of alluded to one of it, the Sangha, the community. I do think that, the ethics or the other sort of parts of say, if we want to stick with Buddhism for all the other parts of being a good Buddhist, if we think about engaged Buddhism, which I know that's kind of a little controversial of a term, but if we think about the forms of modern Buddhism that are socially engaged, right, that social engagement is a big part of the way that those practitioners understand Buddhism, that is a little bit separate from mindfulness that you are given and do by yourself, and that's about working on your own sort of emotions versus what is your mindfulness practice doing for your community of accountability, say. So that's the kind of stuff. I mean, in general, again, almost every chapter, the takeaway is we're missing the community. The community is important. That's part of the container, and we're missing some of the ethics and the norms and the values that were always there with this practice. It wasn't a practice you just did without all this other framework. So that's usually what comes out by the end of each chapter, those kind of things.
So something else I love about the book, too, is the adventurousness of the research process. I would love to know if you have any standout stories of the research process that will stick with you for a long time.
Yeah, I do. So I am not a very adventurous person. It's not true. I mean, I did a lot of overseas that would have seen as kind of spicy, dicey, research, being in Iran during axis of evil times and things like that. But I am a midlife 50-year-old. I'm not that adventurous anymore. And I wasn't really thinking about this book as being that kind of research. I was like, oh, I'm going to go do sound baths. Fine, I'm going to do some more yoga. All right, But the chapter that was the hardest, or I'll go to some Al-Anon meetings. I'll go to some AA or Al-Anon meetings. All right, that's fine. But the chapter that was the hardest for me to do, and the chapter that I didn't expect or plan to do research for in this kind of way, was the psychedelic chapter. I do not drink. I do not do drugs. I do not like any of that stuff. And I was really sure and convinced that that chapter I was going to do by interviewing people who had done psychedelics in a religious setting and sort of compare how that was different, or maybe go do some ethnography, participant observation, watch, see what was happening. And that's not what I did. And I kind of got convinced by a couple of people. I don't know how much time we have for a story. We can cut this off if it's too long. But so Don Lattin is now a friend of mine who I met in San Francisco. We had or in Oakland, California, we had lunch. And he is the author of a terrific book called The Harvard Psychedelic Club, which talks about sort of Harvard was the center of psychedelics and sort of four main characters in that story. It's a terrific read. He's a journalist, religion journalist, but also did a lot of work on psychedelics. And he and I had lunch, and I was telling him about this chapter, and I was basically trying to decide between this kind of Christian group that did a lot of psychedelics and this Jewish one. I was trying to decide who I was going to interview, and he was like, that's not what you want. I know what you're interested in. I know you really want to know people who are really serious about this stuff. I think you're more interested in something like Santo Daime. So I was like, okay, tell me about Santo Daime. I don't think I am, but you tell me why. Because what I knew about Santo Daime was they took ayahuasca as their sacrament. And I was like, I'm not interested in ayahuasca. He's like, no, the religion's so cool. It's like this mashup of Afro-spiritualism and kind of Catholicism. And, it's legal in the U.S. because, so there's the Santo Daime churches can legally bring in ayahuasca and take it as a sacrament. He's like, just go. Those are the serious people that you're going to answer the questions that you want to answer about my questions are really psychedelics are so powerful and I think they're going to be legalized everywhere, certainly in my lifetime. And I think religions have helpful things to tell us about them because I'm not sure we understand how powerful they are and maybe how risky they are. And I just wanted to understand the religious container a little bit more. He's like, those are your people. And so he put me in contact, or he told me, did he put me in contact? No, I think he just told me to email Jonathan Goldman, who was the head of this church in Oregon. And Jonathan and I had this conversation, which was wild because I had lived in Brazil at the same time he had first gone to Brazil and figured out, found this religion, so in the late 80s. We had all these connections and really kind of trusted him. And he had lived in Boston. I lived, anyway, so we had all these personal connections. And some point in the call, he's like, yeah, you can come in 6 months. You can come and work on, you can come and watch and whatever. And then he said something or you could just come next week because someone just canceled. And I had just had this big research trip to a monastery that I had to cancel. So I had it was just this weird thing. I was I had my schedule cleared and I was like, oh, that's so funny. And he's like, no, it's not funny. This is the universe telling you to come. And I actually think because it happened so quickly and I couldn't think about it, I just said, okay, I'm coming. And so within 24 hours, I had booked a ticket to Oregon, agreed to spend 3 days in ceremony in a yurt with this community, who takes ayahuasca 3 times a day, each day, no food.
Wow.
And, had to purchase white clothing for 3, it was this whole thing, right? And quickly read 6 books about this, I kind of walked in whoa. And I walked out whoa. I mean, I, not a believer, but really understood, I think, through those 3 days, it's very different to think about ayahuasca as a drug and ayahuasca as medicine, which I know is a lot of ways people think about it, and ayahuasca as a sacrament. So they think about ayahuasca as a sacrament. It's a way to connect with the divine. And that was a crazy 3 days in the church. Santo Daime believes in spirit channeling. So when you are high on ayahuasca and the person next to you thinks you're channeling a spirit, you also think they are channeling a spirit. And that was I never seen spirit possession myself firsthand. And to be in an altered state meant it was something totally different. I had all kinds of things happen during those 3 days that are probably a setup for my next book. Because some things I can't explain really. And also knowing that I didn't quite trust it was a sacrament. So I really only scratched the surface. That if I'd really understood it to be a sacrament, I would have taken more servings, for example, than I did. I kind of protected myself and was very cautious and kind of scared about the whole thing. But that's an example of research for the book that I did not expect I would do. But it has wild stories associated with it. But also for me, really big, huge, learning lessons that I kind of just am sharing in the book about, ways to think about, even if you're not someone, again, I'm not, when I came back, my partner's like, you're going to go back and do it again? I was like, no, it's not for me. But it doesn't mean that I didn't learn something from that. I'm so grateful for that community and what I learned from being with them, and how it really made me understand the way in which thinking about psychedelics as a sacrament could be something so powerful and so different than the way we usually think about it.
Yeah, best chapter in the book. Like
Yeah,
I
it's
absolutely loved it.
it's crazy, right? I mean, it was, yeah, that was the last one I wrote too. I was just still doing the research while everything else was done. And I was like, whoa, okay. And I'm glad I did that. I'm glad. Hardest 3 days of research. I mean, I came back. I couldn't see straight for 3 days. It's really crazy. But yeah. I mean, I guess what did my friend Juan say? You're really gonna wag the dog's tail or something. Like you're really gonna jump in. So that was the chapter that was the hardest for me to do. But I really did jump in.
So cool. So cool. So, the book is coming out in April. We're talking in late January, so it's still very fresh. But how are you enjoying the promotion process so far? Because you're making the most awesome stuff in the lead up to this book, and I just wanted to know how you're enjoying everything right now.
So that's so funny. Usually authors hate this part. So what happens is, you finish a book and then you do the copy edits and then it just goes to press for 6 months and you have nothing to do. So in August, I let go of the book. I haven't seen it since then. It was done. And the press and, in this case, my agent, everyone tells you, go build platform. And authors hate that. We don't want to sell. We want to write, right? Write, correct me? So, but for me, I sort of thought about it as a different way. For a couple things were lined up well. I had all this nervous writing energy because I've been writing the book and I had to put it somewhere. I also had a sabbatical. And I also had a sabbatical during a particular time when it was we were under budgetary constraints, so I couldn't quite spend and do new research in the way I wanted to. So I had all these things kind of lined up. I had all this time and all this energy. And so I just kept writing, basically. So the book was done and I started a Substack, which I never thought I was going to do. And I was had to hold myself back because I'm I want to write an article every day. This is so much fun. Because I kind of came out of this book thinking like I told you, I feel I'm starting to accept the title that oh my God, maybe I'm spiritual after all, which is not something that religious studies people like. We don't like that term. We think spirituality is just a made up category of all the ooey gooey stuff about religion that people like. But or maybe I'm a version of religious that's this new emerging version, this reimagined religion. That's what I call my Substack. So I just started writing, and that was really fun. And then it found people who were just, I guess, always kind of thinking and feeling the same way. So that was kind of nice. And then I just sort of experimented. I mean, I had already been on TikTok, so I was fine with vertical video. And I just sort of experimented more on Instagram and had things go, some sassy things go viral. But I think I just think about it as finding my people who wanted this conversation. So I'm having, the book's not out yet, but I'm having the conversation already, right? So it's been really fun. I'm back from sabbatical now. So now I'm kind of oh, I can't keep up with the production that I was doing before. I had to slow it down because it's getting in the way of my day job a little bit.
Teaching.
But or service, all the stuff that comes up, grant writing, it's a lot. But I really enjoyed it. I think because it's really fun to know that people wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah, and you have been amazing about
I gotta
helping
plug in my
me.
thing. One second.
Okay.
My phone, my computer's gonna die on me now. I don't want you to be able to start that again. Okay. Am I plugged in? Okay, I'm plugged in. So start that question again, Greg.
Okay. And a lot of the stuff that you talk about, too, is very difficult. Hard conversations we're having in society. The whole Deepak Chopra series that you went through during the whole Epstein revelation stuff was really huge for me personally as a viewer because, I try to make sense of some of the inconsistencies that I see in the world. And what you're doing is really helpful for that because you help me bridge what I see as ethical gaps and voids of people in the world. So I really appreciate what you're doing as well on social media, in addition to the book promotion stuff, but just the current events that you're doing too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I realized is that someone's well, how do you know what to write about? And I'm I have a list. I have a tablet. It's 3 pages long of single, all things I want to write about. And what happens instead of me writing about that is something just happens in the news. And I'm there's hidden religion here that no one's paying attention to. That, of course, all religious studies scholars and faculty can see and would teach. But I'm I'm going to point out the religion here. And there's so much, religion is always in the room. That's what Liz Bucar, my colleague, says all the time. And then that's true. And so that's been really fun to show that. And then also to not be, like you said, the sort of ethical stuff. I'm like, I'm just, when I'm in public, that's the stuff I care about. I care about social justice. I care about ethics. I care about norms. There's no reason to have the conversation unless I'm going to raise that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm just going to start doing it. So it's been really fun to find people who are interested in that conversation and will kind of think with me out loud in those spaces.
Well, if you want to direct listeners to anything to pay attention to with regards to your work, where would you suggest people who want to follow along? Where should they go?
Well, the best thing, of course, is to purchase Beyond Wellness, the book, because that's the most fun. And don't read the last chapter first. Work your way up the psychedelic chapter. But then I think that continue the conversation. If you're someone who likes to read, my Substack is the best place to find me. I'm Liz Bucar, Religion Reimagined there. And that kind of is the beginning of everything I do on social media. If you're someone who's visual, I do a lot on Instagram now. I've kind of figured out like my Instagram thing now. I kind of enjoy doing carousels and slide decks, and we'll do vertical video. I'm just at Liz Bucar there. I'm on TikTok at Liz Bucar as well, if you prefer TikTok. But that's really where I am, and I'm there a lot. All those places a lot. So it kind of just depends on where you already are and where you sort of enjoy being.
Well, congratulations on Beyond Wellness, how restoring the religious roots of spiritual practices can heal us from Penguin Random House. It is a delight to feature you on the show for the third time.
Oh, yeah, it's so fun to be back again.
I feel so grateful for our collaborations over the years, and being able to learn from you in an ongoing fashion. It's just such a pleasure. So, Dr. Liz Bucar, thank you so much for being here. I have had a blast.
Thanks, Greg. It's always great to talk to you.